Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here, your home for gaming, tech, news, and reviews. 8bitdo just announced a brand new fight stick. Let's get started. Alright, to kick things off, a few years ago, 8bitdo released their first fight stick called the N30. Oddly enough, it was NES themed as well. So here is my 8bitdo N30. I have modded it just a little bit. I've replaced the buttons with Sanwa. I've also replaced the joystick with a Sanwa joystick. Out of the box, this fight stick was compatible, or actually is compatible, with Android, Raspberry Pi, Windows, Mac, and the Nintendo Switch. You can play it wired or wirelessly via Bluetooth. And today via Twitter, 8bitdo made the announcement for their brand new fight stick. It says, introducing 8bitdo Arcade Stick for Nintendo Switch and Windows. Ultimate software support, Bluetooth, 2.4G and USB-C connectivity. Dedicated macro buttons, dynamic button layout, ultra moddable with a universal mounting plate. Now looking at their Amazon listing, it's currently listed at $89.99, releasing on October 20th. If I scroll down the page just a little bit, there's some really good information here. First and foremost, it will feature a 1000 milliamp hour battery, which means that you can use this for quite a bit of time before you need to recharge it. Now I'm going to assume that the Bluetooth will probably use more juice than the 2.4 gigahertz method, but again, I don't see anywhere on there that talks about battery life, so I can't confirm that at all. Yeah, there's nothing here that talks about battery life. So with that being said, moving on from there, there's more than enough battery life to enjoy playing this probably for at least a day. It's compatible with Switch and Windows. I'm kind of curious as to why they didn't list Android or Mac or the Raspberry Pi, but if this is X input, I can almost guarantee it will be compatible with a Raspberry Pi. And scrolling down, I want to highlight this right here, 8bitdo Ultimate Software. Ultimate Software gives you elite control over every piece of your arcade stick, customize button mapping, and create macros with any button combination. It even has 2 dedicated macro buttons. Create controller profiles and switch between them at any time. So I can tell you, this stick, if you are a competitive player who plays in tournaments, well, at least physically, well, I guess you can't do that now, but whenever you can compete physically, if you bring this to a tournament, this stick will probably be banned because you can program macros into it. But if you are playing online, chances are, if you're lucky, they don't realize you're using a macro. So macros here are good and bad. In a competitive setting, they're usually heavily frowned upon because it's borderline cheating. But in a non-competitive setting, it's a lot of fun and makes a lot of things exponentially easier. If you're unfamiliar as to what macros are, in a nutshell, this arcade stick has the ability to execute multiple inputs with the press of a button. You can program one of the buttons to execute a series of inputs. For example, a 1-button super. Once you program the button, you set it, you're good to go. Every time you press that button, it will execute the pre-programmed series of inputs. And obviously you should be able to see why this may give some people an unfair advantage. Now in single player mode, macros are a lot of fun, and the button remapping feature here is incredibly useful, especially in those games that don't allow you to change the button inputs or have preset button configurations that maybe you don't like. The button remapping feature to me is an awesome addition. Another interesting feature about this fight stick is the fact that the buttons are labeled via a light underneath. So if you have this in Nintendo Switch mode, the buttons will be labeled in a certain way. If you flip this over to PC mode, the buttons will be labeled in another way. I think this is a really interesting and really innovative feature. The fight stick can be used wired and wirelessly. Now, if you use this fight stick wirelessly, you can use it via Bluetooth or 2.4G. I would highly recommend using 2.4G if you can. 8bitdo's 2.4G connection is miles better than the Bluetooth connection, and you'll probably get a better battery life too. So that's just a heads up right there. It does include the 2.4G receiver, which is very handy. And if you want to use this wired mode, it is USB-C, which is pretty awesome. Now 8bitdo, or 8bitdo, I think is the official name. I always call it 8bitdo. But anyways, moving on. They say this fight stick is ultra moddable. I would argue that the N30 The previously released fight stick is also ultra moddable. This one is ultra moddable in the sense that you can replace the 30mm buttons, no problem, with whatever 30mm buttons you want, provided they use those quick disconnects. The joystick can be replaced easily, they say, with a Sanwa or a Famitsu or a Hap arcade stick, which is really good. However, there is something to consider here. Looking at this joystick, it doesn't look like it's a standard swap. And what I mean by that is a standard Sanwa has a 5-pin connector. So here's the bottom of a standard Sanwa joystick, and here is the 5-pin connector. Now on a lot of joysticks, all you have to do is pull off the previous connector, unscrew the joystick, put the new one in, and snap that connector back on. I can't tell by looking at this image whether or not these are soldered on or if they're quick disconnects. And if I zoom into the image here, it does look like they're soldered on, which means I don't know if I would actually call this ultra moddable, considering if you want to replace the joystick, you will probably have to do some soldering, whether or not you decide just to clip the wires off of this joystick and solder the new wires onto the new joystick, or just desolder and resolder these wires on. For example, here is the joystick from the N30 that I removed. The wires were soldered directly onto the micro switches. Instead of just desoldering these, I clipped the wires and then just soldered them onto the new joystick, but soldering is required, and it looks like soldering will be required for this joystick as well. Another potential, possibly issue is the fact that this top panel isn't reinforced with metal. A lot of the premium fight sticks have a metal panel reinforcing the top to prevent any sort of flex and give when you're pressing buttons and using the joystick. This is straight up plastic. Whether or not that will be a problem is unknown at this point. The Quamba drone, for example, doesn't have any metal reinforcement on the top panel, but it's a fine fight stick. It doesn't really flex at all. Whether or not this one will be, I don't know. The N30 does flex quite a bit. It's very apparent when you use the fight stick. And looking here, I don't see a whole lot of support from the top, especially around the stick here and the buttons. So I'm not certain at this point what type of plastic they've used, what the structural rigidity is of it, but at the same time, it could pose a problem. If you're a heavy-handed player and you really mash buttons and put a lot of force into your inputs, you might run into a problem here. You might be concerned. If you're just a standard player and you don't mash things too hard and you're pretty easygoing when it comes to using fight sticks, you probably won't run into any issue. I think this is a really cool fight stick. I love the design. I love the fact that it is wireless via 2.4G or Bluetooth. I think that it will appeal to a lot of different users. If you're a competitive player, I would probably steer clear of this. But if you're not a competitive player, if you're just a casual player, then this might be right up your alley. Anyways, that is all I've got for today. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are about the new 8bitdo arcade stick. I'm really curious to see what everyone has to say. If you like this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button. Check out my other videos. Thank you, everyone. Take care.